We now return to Senior Notebook on WENY.
Welcome back. We're sitting here today with Eileen Collins, and we often hear everything happens for a reason. And in the book, you have quite a few of those moments. Can you tell us about some of those moments?
Oh, there's so many. When I wrote the book, I wanted to make it interesting, and I think if you tell stories, that's what people want to hear. So I tell the book, I wrote in the book telling stories. So there's so many to pick from. I'm just gonna, the first one that comes to mind is I was flying a T-38, and we have to go back a couple years. I accidentally got in a thunderstorm in a T-38, and I thought I was gonna die. And I remember just praying to God, please get me out of this, and I promise you I will never again go into a thunderstorm. And I got out of it, but the plane was damaged. There was a hole in the nose, the wings were, I was in a hailstorm, and the wings were dented. And I was responsible for that airplane. It belongs to the United States Air Force, to the taxpayers. And I learned a big lesson from that. So fast forward 10 years. I'm in a T-38 again. This time I'm an astronaut with NASA. And I have a backseater who's also a pilot, but I was the pilot in command. And I'm flying my plane back into Ellington Airport in Houston, and you could see the thunderstorm coming. The sky was dark. I mean, it was black sky, and it was coming at us, and you could hear the storm was going to hit the field in like a couple minutes. And so I called air traffic control. I need to land immediately. There's a storm coming. I remember what it was like to be in a hailstorm. And they said, negative, take a vector, and they sended me off to the south. And I said, Houston approach, I see the runway. Can I get clearance to the runway? Negative, take this vector. And I said, I'm almost out of gas. I'm going to die if I don't land this airplane. I said that to my backseater. So I switched to the tower, and I said, tower, I am like 3 miles east. I have the runway in sight, request permission to land. And he said yes. And I turned that plane, I put the gear down, put the flaps down, I landed. As soon as I landed, the sky just, down comes the hail. But we were safe. And something like that, we actually had airplanes diverting, but the T-38 has a very small amount of gas. You can only fly for 1 hour. And we have had astronauts in the past run out of gas and have to eject from the airplane.
Oh my goodness.
So, I have learned, the book is full of stories like that, lessons I learned from mistakes that I made, as well as mistakes that other pilots made that we would study to prevent them from happening again. And I think there's so much to be learned in aviation from case studies like that. And even in our own lives, there's so much to be learned from history. And I think it's very important that people read history and try to prevent making the same mistakes over again.
So what life lessons do you want people to take away from the book? For the young kids that are reading it and saying, maybe I can be an astronaut.
Yeah, so I guess there's really a lot of life lessons in there, and the major lesson is on mistakes. So I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, and you don't want your mistakes to overwhelm you and make you quit. So I won't go into them here, but I will tell you that when I was an astronaut, I developed a 4-step process for dealing with mistakes, because we were always pressed in our job right against the human limit. And as a commander, I'd press my crew up against their limit to force them to make a mistake, because I wanted to see how they were going to handle it. So the 4-step process, number 1, recognize and admit you made a mistake. Number 2, fix it. Number 3, put in a procedure to prevent it from happening again to you or someone else. And number 4, move on. And then moving on is, you really need to not forget your mistake, but don't dwell on it, and don't give up because of it. And you'll see that in, for example, athletics. If you're out on the field and you make a mistake, and now you're thinking about, no, you got to get back in the game. So that's just one example of a life lesson, and there's many of them.
The Senior Notebook will return in a moment.